Hey YouTube family, in this video we're going to talk about what it takes to balance on your hands. We'll start out talking about palmar flexion, how to strengthen that, and then the difference between hand and arm balancing, because they are a little different. Hopefully by the end of this video you'll understand how to properly distribute weight in the hands and maybe even have that breakthrough to get a hand balance. So what is palmar flexion and how do we use it? Well, real simple, you're flexing your palm towards you, right? Closing the wrist joint. Dorsiflexion is going down, fingertips towards the elbow, but palmar flexion, the palm flexes towards you. This is one of the key factors in hand balancing because you're going to have to distribute the weight evenly as you find the balance back and forth. You're already doing this in your legs and you might not even realize it because it comes as second nature. So if you stand, maybe sideways, and then just start to lean forward a little until you feel like you might fall, you'll feel your feet engaging, your ankles. This is called plantar flexion because the bottom of your foot is the plantar side and the bottom of your hand is the palmar side. So it should make a lot of sense that as I lean forward, plantar flexion is pushing down to resist my body weight moving forward, therefore preventing me from falling on my face. Now when it comes to your hands, it's the same thing. All right, I'm gonna lean forward in some sort of position and I'm gonna let that palmar flexion resist the weight coming forward. Now instead of my knees and my hips moving forward, it's my elbows and my shoulders moving forward. And what you'll notice here is as I move forward, my knees, right, even though my hips might move back, I can still move my knees forward, or I have to pretty much move my knees forward to engage palmar flexion. And this is why the elbow is so important and the alignment. So a lot of people talk about shoulder over wrist with hand balancing. We're going to talk about elbows over wrist for the hand balancing. And we're going to maintain that elbow over wrist and palmar flex against it. So enough talk, let's get started. Let's meet on the ground and we'll come into a tabletop position, hands and knees. So in tabletop, we want to understand how to move the weight forward. I spoke about the elbow over the wrist. We're going to maintain that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bend the elbows as we move the shoulders forward. While we're doing that, we're going to want to palmar flex down. Now the floor, I cannot move it. It's solid. So when I flex into it, it will act as resistance, similar to what my feet were doing, right? The idea that we had when we were standing. So elbow over wrist, I'm going to lean forward a little bit, flex my palm. Notice my elbows are not doing this, right? I'm not keeping the weight into my wrist. I'm letting the weight move forward, kind of like moving to the front of your foot, the toe mound, stuff like that. So I'm really flexing. Right? You can see the fingers are lifting a little bit here. They could be flat. It's kind of up to you, right? Where you're comfortable. Palmar flex, fingers also push. There's a lot more to Hasta Bandha, but we're not going in that too much right now. We're talking about the simple idea of flexing your palm into the floor. Hasta Bandha should really engage once you have this concept down. So I like to call this hands and knees to prone or tabletop to prone. So what we're going to try to do is try to go from tabletop flat on the floor. At first, we'll go hips down first. Keep your elbows over wrist. Palmar flex as you come forward to lower. All right, and then see if you can come right back up. Palmar flex. Now you won't be able to come too far forward. And I have a little more distance between myself right now to make it easier. If I want to make it harder, I'll choke it up a little bit. All right, make it a little more into the 90. And that's a lot harder. And notice when I come down, the heel of my hand lifts as if I was bending my knees and my heels of my feet were lifting. Push back, the heels come down. All right, at the very bottom, the palms lift a little bit. Now, if you're doing this and you're like, I can't go low, my hands hurt, my wrists hurt, that's a sign right there that your palmar flexion is not that strong. And hand balancing probably shouldn't even be in your realm yet. You should be able to do tabletop to prone comfortably before even doing crow, because what will happen is you'll develop a habit of bearing all the weight into your bottom or the palm, the wrist, and that's just going to be dangerous. How do we accelerate this, right? Say you're like, okay, I got this part. I'm prone to, tabletop to prone. I own it. Once you own it, let's come into downward dog. So we'll go wide in the feet. We're going to add a little more by having our weight higher in the air. So I'm going to come forward. I'm going to try to do that. Maybe touch my chin. Or just see where I can go, right? Elbow over wrist, then bend. And you should feel the intensity in your hands. Notice. All right, I'm going toes too. Right? I'm coming super far forward. All right, if yours looks like this, go back to tabletop, to prone. I cannot stress enough how important it is to learn the basics, to learn the regression. Right? How would you feel comfortable bearing weight in your hands if you couldn't do it on a small level? Right? Then you're just throwing the weight up there and literally praying that it's not going to hurt you, or you're going to find balance. You're not going to twist your wrist. Right? You don't want to have any of those issues. The last one, right? The yogi strict vinyasa, and I talked about this in the Surya Namaskar video I just did, is the rolling of the toes, right? So now I'm more in this push-up position, roll the toes all the way down. And that's intense. And you could see why yoga is so intense on the wrists from this vinyasa sequence. But this is also, right? Downward dog, plank, chaturanga, up dog, and so on. But you can see why people are getting injured left and right in yoga, because the amount of palm reflection you need to have to do the vinyasa correctly is very intense. I am working very hard, and I have a strong hand balancing practice. So let's talk about the differences between hand and arm balancing. Now that we kind of understand how we're going to bear the weight in the hands, right? We're going to palmar flex as the weight of our elbows and then upper body, torso, shoulders is moving forward. But first, elbow over wrist, maintain, then move the weight forward. And this, like I showed you, tabletop to prone, wide leg downward dog, and then the traditional plank, chaturanga to the floor, or up dog vinyasa. These are all progressions of the same thing, the same hand balance. So what is the difference between a hand balance and an arm balance? Well, simply put, in a hand balance, you're only balancing on your hands, right? So something like this is a hand balance, even though Lolasana or tuck planche can be considered an arm balance. An arm balance would be crane or crow, because now I'm balancing on my arms. So I'm leaning on the arms as opposed to not. Simple, right? One is a lean against the arm or arms in an isometric arm balance. The other is just balancing on your hands. It could be low, high, back bend, circus, whatever, right? And you think of other yoga arm balances. I'll do one more, like Ekapada Bakasana, one leg crow, right? Isometric. Seal that up, then find it, right? To crow, seal it up, isometric, then find it. As opposed to trying to hover, which takes an entirely different core engagement. And that's the main difference between hand and arm balancing. Is arm balancing can be cheated because the isometric, not saying it's not hard if it's done right, but there is that isometric kind of lean where hand balancing is strict, right? And they're both great. I personally love arm balancing. I'm a planche man myself. Handstands too, of course. I'm Jeff. This is Yoga Framework. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned a little more about bearing weight in the hands.